It's a bonanza for central government employees. The 7th Pay Commission bats for a 23.55% pay hike. This could cost the government over 1 lakh crore rupees in FY17, which is 0.65% of the GDP.
In a bid to find political consensus, the government panel led by the chief economic advisor is likely to peg the GST revenue neutral rate between 18 and 20%. Sources say the Congress wants the rate to be at 18%. That's an exclusive.
The public-private partnership model is set for a makeover. The Kelkar panel submitted its report proposing to overhaul the model. The centre promises to act at the earliest.
Markets recover after yesterday's steep fall. The Nifty reconquered 7,800. Sensex rallies over 350 points thanks to strong global cues and short covering.
It's not something that will happen today and then get over by tomorrow. It's a legacy issue, and the fact is that we will not be able to push it away in such a hurry.
Rajasthan, I'm confident, will be the shining star of Uday, and I have no doubt in my mind that under her visionary leadership, Rajasthan will gain the most from Uday.
Rajasthan is the first state government to sign the draft MOU on the Uday plan to revive DISCOMs. Power Minister Piyush Goyal expects the Rajasthan DISCOMs to be profitable in less than 3 years.
Will you look at sweetening it at all, sir?
Is not required.
Vedanta's chairman Anil Agarwal rules out any sweetness for minority shareholders for the Kane India merger, but stopped short of explaining how the two big minority shareholders, LIC and Kane Energy, will come on board.
US law firm accuses Dr. Reddy's of issuing false financial statements. The company refutes the charges and says its books are clean. Nomura backs Dr. Reddy's even as the stock tumbles in trade.
The Competition Commission gives a clean chit to Jindal Steel and Power. Sources say no evidence to support cartelization during the coal block auctions paves the way to claim 3 coal blocks won during the auction.
The Delhi High Court asked the government to probe 21 e-commerce companies including Flipkart and Amazon. This after the Footwear Retailers Association accuses them of flouting FDI rules.
Fresh twist in the Sheena Bora murder case. Police arrest former media honcho Peter Mukherjee, the husband of the prime accused Indrani Mukherjee, charging him with criminal conspiracy.
It's a legacy issue, and the fact is that we will not be able to push it away in such a hurry.
Rajasthan, I'm confident, will be the shining star of Uday.
You're not looking at sweetening it for minority shareholders right now,
That
sir?
is not in my hand. It's not in my hand. The process is going on.
We've never changed our bullish view in India. We kept on investing even when the chips were down in India.
We are, of course, basically looking in acquisition definitely on a port side and on power generation side.
The solar is the next generation of the product and technology. It takes some time, but it will be sustainable in a longer period.
I really don't see any indicators which tell me that the demand will pick up beyond the festive season now. Huge stress in both these sectors, steel as well as power, and we are fortunately better placed to evaluate and to look at various opportunities.
Consumer demand is not fully picked up yet in the country. Once that picks up, I think there will be huge investment increases.
Well, research in Rajasthan saw the state roll out the red carpet for top leaders of India Inc. And you saw them all right here on CNBC TV 18. Good evening. Thanks very much for joining us on India Business Hour. Hi, Nantara. What a day it's been.
What a day. Thank God it's coming to a close now, Shri.
Well, let's start with all the action on Dalal Street. Before we get you the big story, and there's in fact several of them. A sharp recovery after yesterday's sharp fall, and all thanks to strong global cues. Some short covering. The Nifty lost 100 points yesterday, and today it recouped those losses, getting back above the 7,800 mark. Ditto for the Sensex, which also managed to gain ground that was lost yesterday. Mid-caps not far behind, with the mid-cap index gaining close to 1%. So good news there for the markets this afternoon. But the top story this evening, the 7th Pay Commission has submitted its report to the Finance Minister, bang in line with what CNBC TV18 has been reporting. The Commission is set up once every 10 years to revise the salary structure for central government employees. The Commission is proposing a pay hike of 23.55% for 48 lakh employees and 55 lakh pensioners. Now, this includes a 16% hike in the basic pay, a 130% hike in the housing allowance, and a 26% hike in pension. Now, this will mean that the centre will have to shell out over 1 lakh crore rupees in FY17, which will amount to 0.65% of the GDP. The general budget will see an extra outgo of 74,000 crore rupees, and the railway budget will see an outgo of nearly 29,000 crores. Here's the Finance Minister on the panel's recommendations.
There will be now an implementation secretariat which is created, which is headed by the Expenditure Secretary, who's also the Finance Secretary, which will start working forthwith on this. There will be a separate empowered committee, which is normally headed by the Cabinet Secretary, where different departments of the government which are concerned with this recommendation, their heads are members, and therefore if any representations come from any segment, they take a view. Last time when the report was submitted, both these exercises took about 5.5 months. This time we'll endeavour to take a decision quickly. The total monetary impact of this on the finances of the union government entirely, and this does not include PSUs or autonomous bodies, only the central government, and I'm giving it in approximation, is 1,02,000 crores.
We've got Justice A.K. Mathur joining us. Justice Mathur, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV18. Well, congratulations, sir. It's taken you 18 months to put together your recommendations. I understand that you've travelled far and wide. If I can start by asking you to take us through the guiding principles that went into the making of your recommendations. How much of the government's constraints on the fiscal side were you mindful of when you put these recommendations together, sir?
You see, my only consideration was to make the service condition of all the service employees ameliorating, so that they may perform their duty without worrying about their butter and bread. That was the basic consideration, and that was we employed into an accrued formula, which is known as accrued formula, which takes into consideration all the rates of the atta dal, and then thereafter they work out. We have taken all these data from the Shimla Bureau of 1/1/2015. Basing on that, we have determined the basic salary is 18,000, and we have done away with grade pay and with the pay bands, so that each one will be a matrix has been given, and in that matrix one can find its place. For the present persons who are there, they can get their induction into the present matrix with multiplication of 2.57. And so far as the fiscal aspect is concerned, we are conscious of the limitations of the Government of India, and within their limits we have make our recommendation, and the Government of India is likely to burden with sum of rupees 1,02,000 crore for increasing, that includes the benefits to the pensioners and to the serving employees also. There are 52 lakhs pensioners and 47,000 serving people. They are going to be affected by it, and the total kitty will be, total liability of the Government of India will be 1,02,000 crore.
Right. Justice Mathur, if I can ask you, sir, how much of what transpired with the recommendations of the 6th Pay Commission and then the changes that were made by the government and the implications of what happened to the fisc and the deterioration of the fisc were you mindful of as the 7th Pay Commission, sir?
Yes, we were mindful of that. Some of the anomalies of the 6th Pay Commission had been taken care, and therefore one of that was with regard to the grievance made by the JCM is the grade pay and the pay band. That was creating a lot of problems, so that we have sorted out by giving them a new matrix in which there is no pay band, but there will be steps only, and that by present fitment formula is the 2.57 of the present adjustment.
Sir, if I may interrupt you, sir, you know, we were speaking with Justice Sri Krishna, the chairman of the 6th Pay Commission, and he was talking about how the 6th Pay Commission had reduced the grades from 33 to 21, and he was seeking more clarity on what has now transpired on the back of the recommendations that you've made, sir.
Well, I don't know what Sri Krishna has said it, and I don't want to enter into dialogue what Sri Krishna has said it. It's only my dispensation which have been there, I'm giving it to you.
Right. So if you can explain what's happened on the grades a little more clearly, sir, how, you know, if you can explain that to us a little more clearly.
What? Grade pay?
Yes.
Well, grade pay have been done away, that have been subsumed in the basic pay of the 18,000. It has been done away and it has been subsumed in 18,000, and then the regular interval people are going to get 3% of the increment till they retire. Of course, up to 20 years, if they don't perform, then of course they will not get any salary beyond that.
Also, if I could get your clarification, sir, because in your press conference I heard you say that the formulation of pension was on one rank, one pension, and that was something that you were very conscious of. But we just spoke with the Finance Secretary, and the Finance Secretary seemed to suggest that it is not OROP as we are given to understand, and that OROP in fact has not been mentioned. If you can clarify that for us as well, sir.
Well, the OROP is a nomenclature which has been used by the defense forces. But my dispensation is that each officer who retires, irrespective of the year they retired, the pension will be same for them. If a person retired in 2004 and a person who retired in 2010 years back, the pension will be same for them. The army calls it one rank, one pension. We may not call it one rank, one pension, but the same will be dispensation applicable to defense forces also. Let the defense forces make a choice whether this dispensation suits them or the formula which has been given by them suits them. It is their choice. Okay.
Justice Mathur, if I can now talk to you about the areas of dissent, sir, because you did mention that there were at least two or three...
Dissent is...
Or disagreement.
Dissent is only... Well, so far as the NUF, non-functional upgradation is concerned, some of the members said that it should be done away. But this is since already in operation for last 10 years. So we say, and it was only being made applicable to the organized sector only. That resulted in their deprivation to the paramilitary forces and to the defense forces. I said equity requires that the dispensation should be made applicable to all. Why should it be given to organized sector only? So we have made it applicable to all, and I have not advised the government to abolish it, contain it, so that it will redress the grievances of the people who are stagnating in a particular for a long time.
Well, that's Justice A.K. Mathur very briefly trying to explain to us what has been the driving philosophy of the 7th Pay Commission. It's a 900-page report. It's taken the 7th Pay Commission 18 months traveling through the country to be able to put these recommendations together. To make sense of it, we're now joined by the former Chief Economic Advisor Arvind Virmani and Sajid Chinoy of JP Morgan. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us. Sajid, we were talking about the speculation ahead of the report, and now we have the fine print, 0.65% of GDP. What do you make of it and the implications as far as the fisc is concerned?
Well, I must point out, Shireen, these are recommendations at this point. I presume the government's got some degrees of freedom in terms of accepting them exactly as they are, potentially maybe even staggering this over a couple of years, so we shouldn't jump the gun. But to the extent that the central government's direct wage bill goes up by close to 0.5% of GDP, which are the first estimates, that does significantly increase the fiscal challenge for next year. Remember, the context over here, the deficit has to go down by 0.4% of GDP next year. So if you have to achieve that adjustment in the wake of a 0.5% increase in the wage bill, basically what you need to do is find close to 1% of GDP in fiscal space. Right. Now, I've been very impressed by the government's commitment to fiscal consolidation, so I don't doubt that. It just increases the challenge. They'll either have to, find more sources of revenue, perhaps service taxes go up more, find more savings when it comes to subsidies, maybe implement some recommendations of the Expenditure Management Committee, do more asset sales. So there are degrees of freedom, but this just significantly increases increases the challenge, because what you don't want is to achieve that fiscal consolidation at the altar of cutting public investment. I think one of the most admirable attributes of this budget this year has been the government has kept its word. Capex expenditure has gone up. We don't want that to be reversed next year to accommodate higher consumption expenditure.
Well, I just want to take a second to say we told you so. We did say that it's going to be 0.5% of GDP, and that's exactly what the number is. But Mr. Virmani, if I could get you to comment on the concerns that Sajid was raising, and these are going to be concerns that the market will have to sort of adjust and factor in. We heard from the Finance Secretary, of course, suggesting that as far as this budget is concerned, the one in February, the impact is likely to be minimal, and the full impact of this is really going to be borne by the next budget. But given the historical, baggage that we've seen with previous pay commissions, it's unlikely that we're going to see the recommendations being, if I could call it that, improved upon from a fiscal point of view. If anything, the government may have to provide a little more fiscal space. So how do you see this playing out, and do you believe the pay commission itself has achieved a good balancing act?
So a number of points. Firstly, about this year, as the finance minister said, it will take 5 months on average to process the report. So clearly, that is absolutely 100% clear. There will be no effect this year. Number two, historically we know that in the year following, which is the full year, in this case 16-17, sorry, did I get that right? Anyway, the next year starting April, there's usually a historical spike. So the initial concern which I expressed, which many macro people like Sajid and others would have, is that will the projections, the targets or whatever were put out by the government in the last budget in terms of fiscal deficit, revenue deficit be met. And so that is a concern. But what seems to me, after listening to everybody on your program, my guess is, and at this point I would say, I would kind of go out on a limb and say that, the Finance Commission and even the government's last budget took account of the fact that the Pay Commission would recommend increases, etc., and took note of those in their projections. And therefore, my guess would be, of course, there will be some adjustments and some difficulties given that the economic environment is not the same as was projected 9 months ago or 6 months ago. There would be adjustments arising from those forecasts of the economy having gone awry. But overall, I think the task may be much easier than I would have thought otherwise in terms of meeting those targets.
You're absolutely right, Mr. Virmani. And Sajid, when the government had put out its medium-term expenditure statement in August, it had said that salary and pension expenditure is expected to rise by about 15.8 to 16% respectively in 2016-17. But just on the fiscal consolidation point and the levers now for revenue generation, disinvestment, the shortfall continues. 10% stake sale in Coal India will sort of shore up revenues just a tad. Indirect tax collections have been looking strong, surprisingly. Direct tax collections continue to be below the targeted number at this point in time. Asset sales, we haven't seen any. What could be the levers in terms of revenue generation? And also, the big hope at this point in time, as the Finance Minister and the Finance Secretary said, is buoyancy. They're hoping that the economy is going to sort of come back on full cylinder. But you've just downgraded your GDP forecast yesterday.
Yes, but I mean, those are from high levels. Growth went from 7.8 to 7.4. That's a small downgrade in the grand scheme of things. I think over 7% growth in a year in which we've had a second successive drought, I think is still healthy. But I think the larger point is, yes, I think we shouldn't jump to conclusions. As I said, these are recommendations. The government may find ways to defray the cost over more than 1 year. But more importantly, if you step back over the next year, there are some degrees of freedom. As we've seen, hopefully there'll be some buoyancy. There are some tax revenue revenue measures that are possible. Service taxes have to go up from these levels to reach what they would be at GST. So you could raise service tax rates on that front. Asset sales clearly are one option. The government's talking about introducing Aadhaar for the PDS system, which would give you some deduplication savings out there. There were recommendations from the Expenditure Management Committee. So clearly, this is not an impossible task by any means, and I'm sure the government's foreseen that. I guess my simple point is that it just reduces the degrees of freedom a little bit, and the challenge will be to, threefold: accommodate some wage increase, reduce the fiscal deficit to stick to your roadmap, but most importantly, in my view, preserve and augment public investment.
And the word coming in from the Finance Minister to CNBC TV18, don't assume revenues will stay constant till the implementation of the 7th Pay Commission. That's the Finance Minister's word coming in exclusively to CNBC TV18. Arvind Virmani, Sajid Chinoy, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. Appreciate you joining us here to decode the implications of the 7th Pay Commission on the fisc. And here's Finance Secretary Ratan Vattal answering exactly those questions put to him by our colleague Sapna Das.
That 0.5% of GDP works out to around roughly 70,000 crores. The number is slightly higher now, 0.65% of the GDP in terms of the total impact, more than 1 lakh crores. Are we really going to accept all of these recommendations in toto, or you think that down the line the fiscal impact will be slightly on the lower side?
First, I must say that I got to know the report just now, or whatever the Honourable Judge mentioned. It's a report which has to be examined, and the Minister also explained there's a procedure for it. We have the Implementation Secretariat. In fact, T1 starts from now.
Right, sir.
We are going to look at it. The Secretariat is already in position.
There will also be a committee of secretaries headed by the cabinet.
That has to go. A cabinet decision will have to be taken on that, which is also procedural. It will actually be the cabinet secretary will head that along with the major stakeholding ministries, and there will be this consultation exercise. It's a huge report, and we'll have a look at all that, and we'll try and get.
So we can expect the allocations to be coming in the expenditure plans of the government.
Even if you see the past reports, in the first year there's bound to be a little bit of spike in the revenue expenditure. But then whatever is going to be implemented, there'll be a spike, but then the economy grows. I mean, there's a certain growth path. So this spike sort of levels out, and within 15 months or 24 months, the whole thing levels off, and in fact it goes down. So in fact, the figure of
2,000 crores,
2,000 crores, which comes to, is much lower than what was done it's there in that report also.
In the 6th Pay Commission.
So it's something which we can handle.
Right. So we are not worried about the FRBM roadmap as of now, right?
No. So we are
3.6% FRBM roadmap, you will be sticking to it. You'll be sticking to it. I'm doing a Ratnendra cut now.
Even for the state governments, who will actually have to have a look at all this.
Right.
They'll also be comfortable.
Well, that's the Finance Secretary there taking questions from our colleague Sapna Das on the implications of the recommendations of the 7th Pay Commission. But ahead of the winter session of Parliament, the government is doing all it can to push the goods and services tax. Sources say the panel led by the Chief Economic Advisor is likely to peg the revenue-neutral rate between 18 to 20%. Sapna joins us now with the exclusive details. Sapna, you've had a busy day. Will a rate in the 18 to 20% range be enough to obtain political consensus?
The effort here is to make the GST R&R as politically acceptable as possible, and hence the effort would be to keep the rate as low as possible, and it could be feasible that the CA panel may recommend a GST R&R band of 18 to 20%, and if not a band, then actually it could settle around 18% as well. What we do understand is the Congress party particularly has asked for an 18% GST R&R, and if that's the case, to make the rate as acceptable as possible, cutting across various political parties, the GST R&R may actually settle around those levels. Earlier in the day, we had already indicated that the GST R&R will be below 20%. and it now remains to be seen what is the final recommendation by the CA-headed panel. Earlier in the day, there was also a bit of lack of consensus on where the rate should settle. There was a wide variation between 18 to 26%. That's what we had heard earlier. But most likely by next week, there is the consensus will emerge, and you could see the band at 18 to 20%, as I said just now, and if not at least 18%, which is what the Congress party has asked for.
Thanks, Sapna, for joining us with that. So perhaps next week is when this government panel is expected to make its recommendations. Like Sapna was pointing out, perhaps the revenue neutral rate will be in the 18 to 20% range. The 10-member panel headed by the former Finance Secretary Vijay Kelkar has submitted its report on reforming the public-private partnership model for infrastructure projects in the country. The committee proposes to overhaul the entire PPP model, which has been seeing few takers of late. The government's promised to act swiftly on the panel's recommendations. Here's the Economic Affairs Secretary and Vijay Kelkar on the submission of that report.
Over the last few years, PPP projects, which were doing well for quite some time, have run into various kinds of problems. There are problems relating to contractual issues, there are problems relating to finance issues, there are problems relating to capacity issues and implementation difficulties. Now, all these aspects have been addressed. The committee was requested to look into all these aspects. So the committee has held detailed deliberations. The committee has also had very wide stakeholder consultations with various stakeholders and other experts in the field. And today they have submitted the report to the Finance Minister. We will go through the report, and the government will take decisions on the recommendations of the committee as early as possible.
We just submitted a report to the government, and it's really Ministry of Finance will give you a briefing